You know, it was once called the Miracle in the Meadowlands, billion-dollar redevelopment plan in New Jersey, supposed to turn landfills and tainted marshlands into a beautiful new mini-city. Well, the project, which was going to be paid for by private investors, promised to build hundreds of luxury condos, golf courses, even resort hotels. But despite more than $300 million in public financing, the so-called EnCap project never was, leaving New Jersey taxpayers holding part of the bill. All work, it stopped on the project. EnCap, they've gone bankrupt, and a federal investigation is trying to determine what went wrong. Well, Jeff Pillets, a reporter for The Record, he's been investigating this story for years, and he was a finalist for a Pulitzer for his work. Jeff, thank you for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Sure, Richard, no problem.
Well, this Sunday, The Record's going to be publishing an extensive investigative series that you've been working on, like I said, for quite a while. And while much has been reported on this, a lot more has come out at the Wayne Bryant bribery trial, the former legislator in New Jersey. When I went through some of your piece here, it's amazing how systemic this thing was.
Well, I think if you want to get an idea about how systemic the problem is in New Jersey, I think you have to look at the fact that Wayne Bryant, the gentleman who's at the center of this trial, was the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. He was the chairman of other committees as well. He had a long history. So you could not get a more powerful person in the legislative side than Wayne Bryant. So in the person of Mr. Bryant himself, you can see how extensive it is and how deep-seated it is, because he is at the center of these allegations.
What was interesting to me is, while there may have been an abuse of power, certainly by Bryant, some of the stuff that he did that would make you say, oh my gosh, wasn't even illegal. I mean, he was actually a paid consultant while he was voting on the very project he was getting paid for by the company in question, and that's not even illegal in the state of New Jersey.
I think that's an excellent point, and that's a point that Mr. Bryant's attorney brought up several times during the trial, especially when he closed. The original sin in New Jersey, in some senses, is very much conflict of interest, and it's what these lawmakers are allowed to do because they're it's a part-time legislature. They can represent, many of them are lawyers, they can represent private clients, often they're developers, they have their own private interests, and at the same time these lawmakers are voting and advancing legislation that would affect these interests. So you've got a built-in conflict of interest. I mean, that's no secret. But in this case, you did have a situation where Mr. Bryant was earning $8,000 a month in a retainer fee from the developer's lawyer. Whether that was legal or not, we don't know. But at the same time, he was voting on stuff affecting the developer, affecting the developer's projects. So you had a built-in conflict of interest. So your point is very well taken.
Do me a favor, because I have a feeling this Sunday, when the readers of your paper go through your piece, you're going to have some PO taxpayers who are going to say, wait a second here. It's almost like, where do you start with this thing? And it's almost Exhibit A on how you get things done in Trenton if you want a project paid for. Basically, you write a lot of checks and give a lot of cash. Give an idea to people just on how many different levels this thing applied.
Well, I mean, you had influence happening at every level. You had it happening at the levels of the agencies in Trenton where the regulators make their decisions. You had it happening at the level of the Senate and the House floor, the Assembly floor itself, where amendments were made. You had it happening in the governor's office, where there were a number of meetings between the developers' attorneys and the governor himself, the governor's representatives. So you had it happening all across the board.
And going through the piece, Governor Florio, former Governor Florio, actually gave advice on how one goes about to get the funding for this type of project, right?
Well, I don't know if he advised exactly on how to get the funding, but he gave what's known as strategic advice. It wasn't necessarily a lobbyist advice where he deliberately tried to influence a piece of legislation. But he sat down with them and he said, you're going to have to meet with this person, you're going to have to meet with that politician, you're going to have to take care of this nonprofit group, you better watch out these guys over here. So he gave them something that was more valuable than lobbying. He gave them a tool about how to get things done. He would say, and he has said, that he's done nothing illegal, he didn't receive any money for it. And this goes back to your original point. None of this, we don't think, a lot of it wasn't illegal. But it's the question of it happens, and that's how stuff gets done.
And what surprised me, and I'm jaded here, Jeff, but literally, you got more than 10, 12 laws that were literally enacted strictly to get this project going here, obviously with influence from people who want to see this thing happen. Explain to people who say, well, there's one thing with influence, but you're not writing laws. They need, well, they're going to see themselves when they read your piece on Sunday. Actually, laws were written for that very purpose.
That's right. I covered this, and my colleagues covered this for 8 or 9 years, and maybe more than that. And we knew there had been some laws there that had been talked about before, but I didn't know there was 10 or 11 laws that had been influenced or had been written specifically for the developer, by the developer's attorneys and the people who work for the developer. And I thought that was a surprise myself. But I mean, you had laws everywhere from being able to get hundreds of millions of dollars in loans from you know, money that's typically reserved for sewage projects and you know, storm sewer projects went to this private developer, this public-private developer, and that was unprecedented. So for every one of these steps, especially the financing steps, you had to write laws, you had to get laws, because it was a first case incident at all points.
You know, one of the takeaways I took from this, Jeff, finally, was a line in the piece from one of the people you interviewed who said, the scandal isn't what's illegal here. The scandal is what's legal. And if there's one thing readers will take away from it this weekend, it's, my gosh, a lot of this can be done in the light of day, and no one's going to jail for it.
Well, I think that's the thing that I took away from the trial and in this incident as well, is that Senator Bryant was essentially working for the developer. He was receiving money to provide legal advice. Once again, we don't know if that was legal or not. The judge is deciding that in this case. But he was voting on giving them money. He was voting on special provisions for budget transfers. He was voting on laws to give them money and to make special provisions for them. And when you think about that, he wasn't telling anyone that this. He told very few people. His law partner knew, but many people didn't even know who were involved in the project, that Senator Bryant, who you would think would be a independent and honest broker, was actually working for the developer and never told anyone about it. That's what I'm going to take away from this.
Hey, Jeff, any chance finally there's a clawback of any kind? Any of the money that taxpayers, in effect, footed over for this will ever finally go back to Trenton instead of some of these folks' pockets?
You know, I don't think so. I really don't think so. There was 50 of the money that was given to this developer for this Meadowlands project. About 50 million or so has been lost as development went bankrupt. I don't have any hope of seeing that back. I don't think the taxpayers do. I don't think the government does at this point. So you know, it's just chalk it up to another lesson learned. But there's money being wasted all the time, Richard, and this is just another example.
Unfortunately. Hey, Jeff, a great job, and I can't strongly encourage your readers to check this piece out enough on Sunday here. Thanks for a few minutes.